I'm in Dynamics 365 here. Let's have a look at the concept of the physical negative inventory, which is a flag that you can set on the item model group to control how the item behaves. So let's go into inventory, and then you'll find under the inventory menu item model groups. So item model groups control the evaluation, elements of reservation on an item, how some of the physical processes through the system, how it sort of posts financially in the system, for example. So there's a lot of different parameters that are controlled by the model group. So one of them, for example, is physical negative inventory. So this will determine whether you're allowed to go below 0 when you're shipping products, for example. So it has a lot of implications in the system, and it's something you need to sort of really consider in terms of if you want to use negative. Is it has effect on planning, so that you need to sort of be able to see the effect on the planning system for inventory planning, has an effect on looking at cost prices, for example, has an effect on back order management, because you have to track orders that might have gone into negative. How do you follow those up, for example? So let's create a new model group. So I'm going to take a copy. So let's go into the options. We'll go to the record info, and we'll have an option here to create a template. So I'm just going to create a company accounts template. I'm just going to say FIFO, for example, and we'll say OK. So I've got a template of the record that I'm currently on, which is the parameters for FIFO, for example. So I'm going to create a new model group, and therefore I'm going to pick my FIFO template. So we'll say OK. So that'll give us all of the same parameters. So I'm going to say FIFO NI. So I'm going to say FIFO negative invent, for example. All right. So that's all the same properties. We're going to change one of them, which is physical negative inventory, and so therefore for this particular model group that's assigned to items, we can go into negative. So let's save that. Now let's go and create a new item, and we'll see the effect of this. So if we go into, for example, product information management, I'll go and create a release product. So from here, let's create a release product, and let's say the item number is 760, for example. So we'll set up the item, and in this case we'll pick our new model group, so FIFO negative inventory, and let's fill in the other details. So pick our item group, our storage group, our tracking group, so we'll say none, for example. So that's enough for our item, so we'll say OK. Now in this particular case, our item is basically set up. We can go and change prices and all those sort of things, but we'll set them manually on the sales order. So this is where you're going to see the model group assigned to the item. So basically our item's created at this point. So let's go and purchase some inventory. I'm just going to go across to procurement and sourcing, for example. I'm just going to do a basic purchase order, and we're going to say new purchase order, and let's pick our supplier. We'll say OK. So at this point we can enter the new item number. So let's say X760, and let's say our site. I get a message about authorize. We'll have a look at changing that. So I look at our site, so warehouse 21, for example, and let's bring this in at $100. Alright, so that's basically our line details created. So I'm going to save that. We'll keep getting our warning, so we'll change that when we'll go back and edit the item. So let's go purchase, confirm. Alright, so we've confirmed that order. So if we go back to our item and let's open another tab here so we can use these again. I'm going to go over to our product information management again, and let's find our release product. So in this case we said it was X760, so let's open this guy up. Alright, so first I'm going to use it again, so I'm going to change the approved vendor here so we don't get that warning again. So I'm going to say no check, for example. Alright, now if I go into manage inventory, we did one purchase. So if we look at our on hand, for example, we'll see that at site 2 we have a product that's ordered in total. So let's go on receipt in the item. So we'll go on receive, we'll do a product receipt. We'll give it a product receipt number, for example, so we'll say okay. Alright, and we could invoice if we want, so I'm going to go on invoice. Alright, we'll put in our invoice number and we'll update our match status, and then we can post. Alright, so we've invoiced. If we come back and have a look at our on hand, so let's just close it, come back to refresh it, you'll see that physical inventory, available physical, is 1. So let's now go and sell the product. So I'm going to open up another tab. So I'm going to go into accounts receivable, go into sales orders, and let's create a new sales order. And we'll do it for US 002. Alright, and we'll say OK. So at this stage, our item was X760, and so I want to put in, let's say we're going to sell 5 of these. We've only actually got 1 in stock, and so this is where we want to have a look at the effect of negative inventory. So it's at site 2 and warehouse 21, for example. Now we can put in their unit price if we need, so I'm saying 150. Alright, so let's go to our sell tab and let's confirm the sales order. So at this stage we're not going to print or anything, we're just going to say OK, and yes, we want to post. Alright, then let's go and create a picking list. So I'm going to say OK because we're picking up the items from the line item, the sales order, so that's going to be OK. Alright, then we can update our picking list registration. Now this is the point, if we didn't have negative inventory turned on, that we're going to get an error because I'm going to try to pick 5, but we've only got 1 in inventory. So at this stage I'm going to hit the update button and say update all, and we'll see that it says completed. Now I'll do another version where we don't use negative inventory and we'll see the error message that we have here, but basically I've picked the goods. And what I can do is post the packing slip, and we'll say OK, yes. Alright, so if we switch over and have a look at our on hand, I'm just going to now refresh this page, and let's have a look at our item. So we'll jump in there, and if we go to on hand, what I'm going to see is that I'm now in negative, so -4, because we had 1, we sold 5. So I wouldn't be able to go into negative if I didn't have a the model group that's assigned to the item, if I hadn't set that to negative physical inventory, for example. So let's have a look at another example. I'm going to go and create a new item. We'll set it up, but we'll set it up with the model group without physical, and I'll pause the video while I do that. I'll get to the point of the sales order and we'll have a look at the error message. Alright, so my item is going to be 761, and I'm picking my model group, which is just the FIFO one. It doesn't have negative physical inventory turned on. So I'll pause the video again and we'll come back and complete. Okay, so I put our product in and I did a purchase order of 1, so we have 1 in the system. And what I also did, if you have a look in on hand, is that we have 1 physically available, and on order there's 5 because I've put in a sales order. So I've put in the sales order and confirmed it. Now let's try and pick, pack and ship. So if we generate the picking list, we'll say OK, yes. Alright, so let's do the picking list registration and we'll update. Alright, so this is where we get the difference of the negative. So we'll see here the message details. We'll see that 5 cannot be picked because we only have 1 available in inventory. And so that's the effect that in this one we're not tracking negative inventory. So this is where we need to look at our practices in terms of how do we want to process items through the system. Do I want to deal with this as a back order? Because I could say that I could pick 1, for example, and so we'll say OK to complete the pick for the 1. And in this particular case, if we wanted to ship it, I could say post the packing list, for example. Now we'll post based on what we picked, which is basically we're shipping 1, for example. So in this case we'll say OK. And if we have a look at the general tab, and if we have a look at line quantity, we'll see that we've delivered 1 and delivery remainder is 4. And so if we go and have a look at the on hand of this item, so we'll say on hand, we'll see that on order is still 4, and so total available is 4, but physical is 0, for example. So that's the effect of the physical negative inventory, or one example of the effect of physical negative inventory, and that's necessarily processing the sales order lines, for example. So you'll find that on the item model group. It is something that you want to really consider carefully relevant to your operational processes, planning processes, costing processes. It's also not something that you want to keep flipping on and off in the system. If you make a decision, use it, test and operate the system that way with negative inventory or not negative inventory. Don't flip-flop it backwards and forwards, because it'll get a little confusing looking at, for example, costing in the system. But that's physical negative inventory. You'll find that on the item